in 2012 in a way we haven't seen in decades. I'm Ian Bremmer, president of Eurasia Group, and these are the 10 biggest risks that I see for 2012. Let's start with number 10. Venezuela. President Hugo Chavez, with ailing health and major elections at the end of the year, whether he wins or loses, whether he lives or dies, 2012 is going to be an incredibly challenging year for South America's leading oil exporter. Number 9, South Africa. Another country facing elections at the end of the year, but President Zuma, who has been fighting to ensure the cohesion of his own African National Congress, is going to have to move towards populism to ensure that he has a successful election. Number 8, Egypt. We have a long and increasingly bloody fight between the military and the Muslim Brotherhood on the one side and secularists that are demonstrating in Tahrir Square. Number 7, China. Security tensions between China and the United States across Asia are likely to grow more significant in 2012. Many of America's allies are very concerned about Chinese dominance of Asia and will be looking towards the U.S. for political and security integration, while they look to China for economic integration. Number 6, Pakistan. A country having difficulty with basic governance, major humanitarian crises, large swaths of their territory not under control, and no longer a significant money-producing alliance with the United States. The potential for spillover as the U.S. pulls out of Afghanistan, bringing India into a conflict they've been able to avoid for the better part of a decade, makes Pakistan worth paying note in 2012. And now to number 5, North Korea. Perhaps the single most important geopolitical risk in an individual country this year comes from a transition to a 28-year-old third son, Kim Jong-un, in the world's most totalitarian regime. It's inconceivable that he'll be able to run the country. The only question is whether he'll be allowed to be a symbolic figure. Number 4, the United States. Not the elections in the United States, but after that, there's going to be trillions of dollars at line for a potentially lame duck government, or maybe a second-term Obama presidency. Have to be done in November and December, and the markets hate that level of uncertainty. Number 3 is the Eurozone. Only number 3. In part, that's because the Eurozone's not going to fragment, but it is going to muddle through. They have the capacity to continue to kick the can, even though it's getting harder and harder. The markets are going to hate that, but they have nothing to do but put downward pressure on the sovereigns in Europe. Number 2, the G0 and the Middle East. A world without leaders, that's the G0, and it has risks all over the world, but nowhere more so than the Middle East, where the United States is a taker, not a maker of foreign policy. Instead, it'll be regional powers like Saudi Arabia and Iran and Turkey, in most cases competing for influence. And the top risk for 2012 is the end of the 9/11 era. There's no more bin Laden. The U.S. is out of Iraq. Afghanistan has an end date. And yet, the areas that we look at in geopolitics are increasingly economic risks. And finally, to the red herrings. More important this year than many, in 2012, almost half of the world's GDP has either elections or has political transitions, and yet they're not that significant in terms of political risk. China's not going to experience a hard landing in 2012. The state will stay as the most important investor driving that economy. It's going to create major problems for the Chinese in the medium term, but not this year. There will be no fragmentation of the Eurozone, possibly the single most overstated risk in the media today. And finally, it is 2012. I feel confident there will be no Mayan apocalypse. Of course, if I'm wrong, there's nothing you'll be able to say to me. Thank you so much. I am Ian Bremmer, president of Eurasia Group.